Hey there, everyone. This is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 22nd film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, slash, what is at the time of this video, the highest grossing movie of all time, Avengers Endgame. Nah, yeah, well, let's talk about the lead into this movie now, shall we? Now, we all know that the build-up for Infinity War was a big deal. Ever since the ending of Avengers, where it was revealed that Thanos is the one bankrolling Loki, you knew that they were going to be building up to a confrontation with Thanos. And then with the reveal of in Thor: The Dark World about the Infinity Stones, you knew that was going to be tied in together. And so as the films kept going on, you knew that you kept seeing them getting added more and more to that. As such, when Infinity War came out, it was a huge deal because it was finally payoff. But the thing is, while Infinity War did deliver in spades with the action, it was able to keep the tension going with its ending. Because as we remember from the Infinity War vlog, or if you've just seen the movie itself, that it ended with the Avengers losing badly. Thanos managed to get all of the Infinity Stones, and the end result was that half of the universe, including a good chunk of the superhero community, got killed, all reduced to dust. And so the ending of Infinity War pretty much just asked the question, what are we going to do now? And so that's where Endgame came into play. You knew that with this movie, they had to find. You knew this movie with with as big a task as saving half the universe, you knew it was going to have to be a big deal. And so when the very first advertisement came out, without really even knowing what they were going to do to save everybody, you knew shit was going to go down. Though people were able to figure out that it was time travel. So, but you know. So with that said, does the film deliver on it? It's the highest grossing film of all time. What do you think? But before we get into that, let's get into the spoiler for plot summary. As I just said, since this film is technically a part 2 to Infinity War, it pretty much picks up where it left off, sort of. As I just mentioned, the ending of Infinity War involved half the universe being killed and the Avengers trying to recoup their losses. The last place that we wound up, the first person we actually come into, that we do technically talk to someone else, but I'll get to him later, is the first people we see are Tony and Nebula. As after the battle with Thanos on Titan, and after with most of the Guardians pretty much being reduced to dust, they were pretty much the only ones left there. As such, they took the Guardian ship and left, but unfortunately, in the battle with Thanos, their fuel cells were cracked. The end result. Sorry, my dog's just walking over there being cute. Not being a dick cute, just being cute. Sorry. Anyways, I was saying, the fuel cells for the ship were cracked, and while Tony and Nebula were doing their best to try and keep the ship afloat, it ultimately didn't work out, as the ship is now dead in the water, and they're slowly running out of supplies, food, water, and of course, oxygen. As such, Tony ends up feeling the effects more and more, and he's actually recording messages for Pepper in case he doesn't make it back to Earth. And at one point, he eventually does pass out, and Nebula puts him in a chair just to help him rest. But fortune seems to shine on them, literally, as a glowing figure appears in their vision that turns out to be Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, who was able to grab their ship and bring it back to Earth, where not only are the Avengers there to meet them, but thankfully so is Pepper, who goes to greet them as Tony comes shambling out after Cap comes in to help him get off the ship. As such, while the group wants Tony to recover, they're still trying to figure out what exactly happened to Thanos, because at this point 3 weeks have passed in universe. 3 weeks have passed in universe. So as a result, all the world governments are, thanks to what Thanos did, the world governments are in shambles, and what's left of them is just tallying up everybody that's left on the planet. But it seems that Thanos did exactly what he said. Half of the world's population has been reduced by 50%. And so pretty much all the Avengers are doing is just trying to figure out exactly trying to find out where Thanos is. Cap ends up asking Tony if he has any clues where Thanos could be, since he actually directly fought with him. But Tony in a combination of grief, hysteria, and anger, just is not willing to talk to Cap at all, as he just pretty much tells him, you said, like, because he kept saying, I told you this all would happen. I want to build a suit armor around the world, but you didn't want to do it because to protect your precious freedoms. Or he just throws it back at Cap, saying, you said we lose together. Sorry, a second. I have to remember to silence my phone. Anyway, you said we lose together, and we didn't even do, but I lost, and I needed you. Needed you. And Cap says, no, we need you now. It's like, no, I needed you. That trumps your need. I'm done. There is nothing here. I don't know where he is. I don't care anymore. I am not helping you. And just kind of to rub it in, he takes the chest plate that has all his nanomachines and says, you take this, and when you find Thanos, you put that on, and you hide before he eventually just passes out. They're able to get him in. They're able to get him to bed, but they make it clear he's going to be out for the rest of the day. And so Carol says that. Carol just seeing all this says she's going to find Thanos herself and kill him. Though the rest of the Avengers say, no, we're coming with you. We're coming with you. Because this is their fight too. On top of that, everyone is pretty much taking this loss hard, especially Thor, who, because, well, he was the closest to actually taking Thanos down. He got Stormbringer made especially to kill Thanos, and he got the closest, actually getting in and stabbing Thanos right in the chest. But unfortunately, it wasn't a killing blow, so Thanos was still able to succeed in that snap. As such, it makes it clear. As such, they pretty much make it clear that they're all going with Carol and that they're all going to confront Thanos, because pretty much their plan now is that they need, because if they want to try and bring back everyone that Thanos got rid of, then they're going to need the Infinity Stones. The only problem is Thanos is the last one with them, and they don't know where he poured it off to. However, they actually do have a lead now. You see, when Thanos did the snap, the Earth was supposed to be, as Rocket put it, the Earth was the epicenter of a large-scale cosmic event. Now, and 2 days prior, on another planet in the universe, another similar event happened, and Nebula says that when she was under the service of Thanos, and he talked about his grand quest to kill half the universe, he said that when it was done, they retired to a place called the Garden, and so as such, they believe that this garden could be on this planet. As such, the Avengers suit up, and the remaining Avengers grab whatever they can and suit up, and so they all go to this planet, to try and go after Thanos. Though even and so they manage to get there, and Carol does some bit of recon on the planet to see if they can find anything, but she notices that this planet has no major defenses, no soldiers, no nothing. The only living being down there is Thanos. As such, the Avengers go down to Thanos, and we actually see him in kind of a similar state to how he wound up at the end of the Infinity Gauntlet comic. He has a farm. He's put his armor up as a scarecrow, and we see him actually going out and taking plants to make into a stew later. However, he's looking a bit more worse for wear since the last time we saw him, as now he seems to be walking with a limp, and a bit of his face seems to be burnt. Although that doesn't really seem to matter for the Avengers, as they immediately bust right into his house, and the first thing they do is just hold him down. Carol holding him in a full Nelson with Thor, with Bruce coming into the Hulkbuster, and I think it was War Machine that came in and take the other hand, and then Thor coming in and just before Thanos can do anything, he just comes in and chops off his hand with the Infinity Gauntlet on it. As such, they immediately go to the Infinity Gauntlet to try and get it. But unfortunately find that all the Infinity Stones are gone. They immediately start asking where the hell the Infinity Stones are, and Thanos just says he got rid of them. He didn't, because at this point because now that he completed his task, at this point for him the Infinity Stones now serve nothing more than temptation. So he didn't see any more use for them. Of course, and so the Avengers do start putting two and two together. They are trying to deny it, but that even saying that 2 days prior they know he used the stones for something, and so Thanos confirms he used the stones to destroy the stones. Hence why he looks burnt, and this adds further credence to my near-death experience in the Infinity War thing, because with the amount of power he was using the Infinity Stones for, and so on such a grand scale, I think the feedback would be something big. And when he first used the Infinity Stones, it fried the gauntlet, and so it looked And so to use them again and to use their power to literally destroy them, 6 gems that are pretty much meant to be remnants, are meant to be remnants of whatever universe came before slash the Big Bang. Yeah, that's gonna be a big feedback too. Which in turn is why he has a limp and is now looking more burnt. But yeah, he's not lying. Even Nebula confirms that while he's a lot of things, he ain't a liar, and the Infinity Stones are most likely gone. To this, Thor takes Stormbreaker and cuts off Thanos' head, walking away, saying, "What? I went for the head." As such, we then cut to 5 years later. Not joking. It turns out that for the next 5 years, the world kind of has to move on from what happened. And it's a pretty big thing. And yeah, we see that despite all the amount of time that's passed, the world hasn't fully gotten over what Thanos did. As the first instances we see of a changed world are that, one, Cap is actually hosting a support group for people who have lost loved ones in the snap, and we see that Black Widow is kind of acting as a relay for the rest of the Avengers, with Nebula, Rocket, and Captain Marvel going out and taking care of any space stuff. Okoye kind of taking care of stuff taking care of stuff on the eastern continent, on eastern continents, while Rhodey Rhodey most likely deals with them on the western continents. As such, they kind of have weekly meetings via holograms, and it's just them kind of doing relay and just trying to keep the world in order after what happened with the snap. Although during the mission, during this transmission, Rhodey does tell Widow about these about these about this about this cartel in Mexico, where the Federales came in and found that they were all dead, none of them having even gotten the chance to pull their guns. Saying that it was Clint, and with what he's been up to the last 5 years, if with what he's been up to for the last 5 years, would they does he want to be found by his friends? Because Clint didn't take it well either. We'll once again get back to him later. However, through all this, we end up cutting to a garage where people kind of keep their old stuff, and we see that, like a storage garage, and so we see this one area labeled Lang, which in turn has the van that Scott had in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We see that it's kind of still collecting dust, but inside is all the technology that we saw Scott, Hope, Hank, and Janet using to try and go into the quantum realm to try and retrieve the healing particles. And no, we don't know what has happened to Ghost in this intervening time. Either she's dead, living her life, or got snapped. I don't know. Either way, we see a rat crawl over the controls for the quantum tunneler, and manages to reactivate it, causing Scott to end up bursting right out from the back of the van into a pile of garbage. As such, she has no idea where he is or what's going on, and he immediately spots a camera, gets out of his suit, and manages to get a security guard's attention, who in turn lets him out and brings his stuff out. As such, Scott starts wandering around and starts wondering what the heck's going on. And he does soon become aware of what Thanos did, as he discovers that, as he actually finds that there's a memorial to all that in San Francisco. There's a memorial to all the people that have been lost. Scott, of course, is naturally worried since, well, he doesn't, because, well, anybody could have gotten killed, and so he starts looking through the names and wants to be sure that Cassie's name isn't on there. However, when he gets to Lang, he finds his name on there because, well, everyone thought that he got snapped away too, since no one could find him after the event, and so naturally you think he went poof. As such, Scott finds his name and goes back to his old neighborhood, and so he finds Cassie's house and knocks on the door. As Cassie then answers it, now having gotten older, and it's a rather nice scene as we see both of them just reacting to the other. Cassie just looking like she can't believe that her father's standing right in front of her, while Scott's gonna take in that his little girl is now older. It's really nice as they both just are taking each other in, and just they embrace each other in a hug. It's sweet, and it's adorable, and I like it. But with this in mind, Scott ends up going to the Avengers mansion, and at this time, Cap goes to talk with Widow, and they're just kind of talking about how, despite the fact that they're supposed to be moved on at this point, that the world's kind of changing, that some people have moved on, and some people have moved on from the tragedy. They haven't, because that's their whole thing. Maybe they should get lives, until they get the alert that Scott's at the front gate. When they see them, they think maybe it's Cap asks if it's an old video, but Widow says no, this is a live feed. As such, Scott comes in and he pretty much explains that 5 years ago he went into the quantum realm, and he's been there, and he only recently got out. Widows thinks that, well, that's gotta suck. It's gotta suck being under there for 5 years. But Scott explains no. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It turns out that from Scott's point of view, he was in the quantum realm for 5 hours. Yes, he stayed in there longer than he was supposed to, but essentially, while he was down there, it was just, for him personally, he hasn't even been down there a day. Less than a day. Far even less than half a day. And so with the knowledge of what Thanos did, and with how badly the Avengers got beaten, he thinks that maybe the quantum realm might be the key to fixing all this, because he starts to think that maybe the time works differently in the quantum realm, as, like I said, 5 hours there, 5 years up there, 5 years in here, 5 years here. So maybe if they could take advantage of that, then maybe they could enter the quantum realm at one time and then come out at a different time, perhaps an earlier time. And so, in other words, a time machine. And so he thinks that maybe they can go back in time, and so he thinks maybe they can take advantage of that, and then go back in time and stop Thanos before all of this happened, or in this case, get the stones. Which, while he thinks is a bit insane, the Avengers are willing to take any chance they can get, because at this point, what do they have to lose? Half the world has already been killed. At this point, all they'll be doing is winning. At this point, either it's going to fail, or either they succeed, or nothing happens at all. So they're willing to take this chance to perform I'm going to keep calling a time heist, and I like saying that. No reason. I just like saying time heist. However, with this in mind, they think that they're going to need some help. As such, they go to see Tony, and we see that in the 5 years since Infinity War, he has a family. Yep, he and Pepper have actually managed to get a nice little house on the lake, and they have had a kid. It's a girl. That's not a boy. It's a girl. It's a girl, but it's still named Morgan, and she's just an adorable, and she's just a bright little ray of sunshine. She's adorable. In fact, the very first scene we see of her is Tony going out to get her for lunch, and we see that she's wearing a Iron Man-ish helmet. It turns out that she found in the garage. Turns out Tony's making Pepper her own Iron Person suit. So that's cool. That's nice. But as he's bringing her in, that's when Widow, Cap, and Scott come up. And so they try to get him to join their side, but Tony isn't exactly willing. One, he thinks that the whole idea is impossible, and that Scott just got lucky. And two, even if they could, he's got a family now. He doesn't want to lose that. He doesn't want to lose that. He's gained a lot. He may have lost a lot in the intervening time, but he doesn't. This is the most important thing. This is just right now. Pepper and Morgan are the most important things in his life. They do try to get him to come around, but he doesn't exactly do that. And while he doesn't tell him to get lost, even saying that he is that he is still happy to see them, he makes it perfectly clear he's not interested in what they're saying, and he's not interested in what they're saying. And unless they want to stop talking shop and join them for dinner, they can kindly leave. As such, the group does leave, and they're wondering, well, who can we go to now for this whole thing? And so they think, well, we need someone else that's smart, and Scott thinks, well, whose brain is bigger than his? And so we cut to a diner where we see what happened to Bruce Banner in the intervening 5 years. Or more specifically, Professor Hulk. Yeah, I'm not even joking. As Bruce says, it turns out that after the events of Infinity War, he also kind of took the defeat with Thanos pretty badly as well, and as he felt that he lost to Thanos twice, once as the Hulk and once as Bruce Banner. However, after However, after everything went down, he started thinking, what if the Hulk? He started realizing that he started kind of considering the Hulk as less of a disease that needed to be gotten rid of, and more of a cure. As such, he decided to perform an experiment, putting himself in isolation, being with constant exposure to gamma radiation. And so, over the course of the 18 months, he absorbed enough gamma radiation so that he was hulked out. So that he was hulked out 24/7. But it's Bruce Banner in the driver's seat. Essentially, what he did was that he pretty much combined them both persona into one being. Now, in my mind, it means he erased the Hulk, because while the Hulk was, while you can say that the Bruce and the Hulk are two sides of the same coin, the Hulk was at least clearly almost a different persona. So, yeah, if you ask me, it just sounds like Bruce erased the Hulk. But whatever. He's less angry now, and now he's actually more of a role model as you see these kids come up and want to take a selfie with him. And he dabs. And that's the last I'll say on that. But he also doesn't exactly think this is a good idea. He doesn't exactly think he can do this either, but he's willing to give it a try. Give it a try, because again, what do they have to lose? As such, we then come back to Tony in his house as he's washing dishes, and he's still kind of mulling over the whole idea with time travel. And while he doesn't think it's going to work out, he sees a picture of himself and Peter. He sees a picture of himself and Peter, and he decides that maybe he might as well at least try his hand at it. As such, he has Friday set up a simulation to try and set this whole thing out, and even says, "Don't worry if it doesn't pan out. I'm just testing a theory." And he discovers that time travel actually is possible, which in turn actually causes him which actually kind of shocks even him. As such, he says shit to this, and we see that Morgan's in the back, and she starts repeating it too. And so he puts her to bed, and it's another adorable thing, and he says, I love you bunches," and she's, "I love you 3,000. It's super adorable. And so Tony goes to see Pepper, and he then tells her that he's kind of got the whole time travel thing down. But at the same time, again, he wasn't wrong. He still has a lot to lose here. Pepper and Morgan are his world right now, and he even tells her, "If you want me to stop doing this, I will." But she tells him, no. But she says, "People kind of need your help right now. People need your help," and she pretty much just makes it clear if he has a means of helping of saving all these people that are lost, she thinks that he can do it. As such, we then cut to the Avengers Mansion the next day as we see that they have managed to try and create something akin to a time machine and are testing it out on Scott, using the quantum tunneler in the back of the van to try and test out time travel. As such, they power it all up and test it out on Scott, and it doesn't really go well, as they end up aging Scott into a baby, an old man, into Brightburn, and then back into himself. And while it is a kind of a step in the right direction, it's still several steps behind where they need it to be. However, Tony ends up rolling up, and he turns out he's created pretty much what I'm going to call a time band. It's essentially what he calls a time GPS, allowing you to properly navigate the time realm. And he even points out the problem that they had was that the way they were using it, instead of having them move through time, it was having time move through them. Hence why Scott was turning into a kid. At this point, but Tony says that he's pretty much got what they want, and at this point he's ready to bury the hatchet with Cap. Years have passed, and he says that resentment is not doing them any good. But he also tells Cap, but he pretty much does tell Cap under uncertain circumstances, if it comes down between saving everybody and keeping his family, he's gonna choose keeping his family. He's gonna try and save everyone as much as they can, but he's built a life for himself, and he doesn't want to lose it, which is understandable. Again, these people they've already lost. They can try and get better by trying to bring everyone back, but at the same time, he's managed to build something new for him, and you can understand why he would prioritize them. It's his family. Of course he would prioritize them. But he'd also, to try and further prove that he's ready to bury the hatchet, he brings Cap's shield, as the last time we saw Cap with it was in Civil War, and he threw it at Tony's feet as Tony told him he didn't deserve it. And so as Tony brings it to him, Cap does say no, he doesn't deserve it, and he says, "No, he made it for you. You should have it." And it's a nice scene, showing that they're ready to fight side by side again, and it's really good. As such, they began assembling more of their team to try and bring them together to try and get this all going. With Nebula, Rocket, and War Machine coming into aid, and so when they come, the Hulk. We end up they end up going to go pick up two new Avengers. In this case, Rocket and Hulk going to Norway to pick up Thor, and Widow going to Tokyo to pick up Hawkeye. As such, in Norway, we see that what's left of the Asgardians have settled there in a little town that they call New Asgard, where they kind of set up a life. However, it turns out that ever since Infinity War, Thor has just gotten worse. As he's gotten lazier, more angry, taken to drinking, and he's gotten fat. That was a shocker, but it's hilarious. But in a way, it's sad, but kind of funny. As we see that now he spends most of his days just sitting on his ass while Korg and Meek play video games on the couch. He keeps drinking beer, and he uses Stormbreaker to open up his beer bottles. It's just like, it's so sad, but in a way it's so funny. But by the same token, when they try and say that they have a way of fixing everything, he's not exactly willing to listen. Not even wanting to hear Thanos' name. Bruce does try to convince him to come back with him, as he says he was in a similar spot before with the Hulk when he was on Sakaar after the events of Age of Ultron, but Thor is still kind of is wallowing too much in self-pity, and so Rocket's able to convince him by saying we got beer on the ship. In the meantime, we then cut to Tokyo with Hawkeye, and yeah, Hawkeye's been taking this loss a lot worse than before. As I mentioned in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man and Hawkeye managed to get a plea deal they got that managed to let them go home to their families, but put them under house arrest. As such, at the time when the snap occurred, Clint was just kind of getting ready to sit down to dinner / a picnic with his family, while also teaching his daughter how to use the bow and arrow. However, just as when he turned his back, when he wasn't looking, the snap occurred. When he told his daughter to go get an arrow out of a tree, she disappeared. And when he looked for her, he found that his kids and his wife were gone as well. And as such, for the last 5 years, he's been taking that loss and using it to kill criminals. In this case, becoming a new persona that has been called Ronin. That has been called Ronin. Now, if you expect me to know anything about Ronin, I know jack shit. The only Ronin I know in the Marvel Universe is Ronin the Accuser, and he's already dead. So, I'm still going to call him Hawkeye. I know he's going by Ronin, but fuck it, I'm going to call him Hawkeye. And that's going to get me off, and that, just by saying that, it's going to get me off of YouTube searches. Worth it. Anyway, Widow managed to track him down after I'm guessing Yakuza. Don't quote me on that. It's business guys. They're obviously seedy and underground, and he pretty much kills them. But Widow comes in and tries to convince him, and tries telling him that that she thinks she has a means of bringing his family back. While he does try to tell her to stop because he says don't give me hope. She does manage to convince him to come back with them to the Avengers mansion. As such, they now have the technology with Tony's time band, and so they use some of the remaining pin particles they have to try and do a test run with Hawkeye doing the first run, going back to his house in the past, which ultimately goes well as he goes back there and picks up a baseball glove and almost talks to his daughter before he gets pulled back. As such, with the success, all that remains now is trying to get the Infinity Stones, but there's a problem. The Infinity Stones have been in a lot of places throughout the movies, so they need to get, and they only have so many pin particles, They only had enough for like one test run and pretty much a round trip for each of them, So they have to be very precise with their targets. They need to be able to get in there, get the stone, and get back out there without any problems. Because if they fuck up, then that's it, game over. As such, they begin planning out who's going to go where and when to get the stones. Ultimately everyone gets divided up into 3 teams. Team 1 with one team consisting of Rocket and Thor, who are planning on going back in time to Asgard during Thor: The Dark World, as at the time the Reality Stone, aka the Aether, was bonded with Jane, and their plan is to try and go there, charm Jane, and then they can inject and they can get and so Rocket can pull the Aether out of her. In the meantime, Nebula, War Machine, Hawkeye, and Black Widow are going to go back in time to during Guardians of the Galaxy, as they need to go to... Hold on a sec. Sorry, looked up the name. They have to go back in time to Morag, as that's where the Power Stone is, and while they're doing that, Black Widow and Hawkeye will go to Vormir and grab the Soul Stone. As such, the final team will consist of Hulk, Ant-Man, Captain America, and Iron Man, who will go back in time to New York, as all three of them, as during their conversations, which actually was kind of nice, as we kind of saw them just sit, as we saw them all just kind of brainstorming, sitting around, getting dinner, just kind of goofing off in a way, and just trying to brainstorm where they go and when. As they realized that during the climax of the first Avengers movie, there were 3 Infinity Stones in New York: the Mind Stone in Loki's staff, the Space Stone in the Tesseract, and finally the Time Stone, which was being held by the Sorcerer Supreme. And since they know where the Sanctum Sanctorum is, they can pretty much get 3 stones in one go. As such, the teams are organized. They all get these suits that are supposed to help them travel into the quantum realm and back. And so they get their time machine ready, which in this case is a giant version of the quantum tunneler that can go on the floor. And so the teams split up and go and travel back in time to their respective points in time. With going to the event with going to the places I already mentioned. And just like with Infinity War, the film kind of has a lot of stuff going on within it. And like Infinity War, the plots kind of start to diverge from here. As such, I'm going to be going through them one by one, while trying to keep things as coherent as possible. I'll start with the plot line that I think is the least important, the stuff with Thor and Rocket. As they go back to Asgard when Jane is there, and while the plan is to have Thor go in there and charm Jane so that Rock can go in and take the Aether, Thor's still not really up to it. He's still being distracted. He's having a bit of a problem, and he's really just not into this, and even kind of having a panic attack as he's trying to find instead of going after Jane, he's trying to find the wine vault. Rocket tries kind of getting him out of the groove tries getting him out of the groove, but it's not working, especially when Thor sees his mother again, and he starts having even more of a breakdown. Rocket tries telling him, "Look, she's gone for good, but our friends, they're almost gone, and we have a chance of bringing them back. So I need you to focus here." And while it does seem to get Thor to listen for a second, he just runs off to follow after his mother, causing Rocket to just kind of groan and just go after Jane himself. As such, Thor meets up with his mother, and while he initially planned on just spying on her, she was raised by witches, and so she's able to figure out that he's following her. She tells her servants to go away as she goes to confront Thor, and while he does try to pretend he's the original Thor, she knows that there's way too many differences, and she's able to conclude that he's from the future, which has caused him to break down and give her a hug. I'll admit, this is actually a nice, really sweet scene, as despite the fact that this is not her Thor, it's still her Thor. It's still her son, and so while she knows he's from the future, she's actually willing to give him an ear to talk to. As such, she pretty much explains everything that's happened to him that's pretty much happened to him all the years. The stuff with losing his hammer, becoming Asgard, its destruction. The stuff with Thanos losing his eye, just how bad things have gotten. However, she gives him reassuring words, telling him that because he says that a lot of people have been expecting this stuff of him, and she says the mark of a true hero isn't what people want him to be, it's how true he is to himself. And she pretty much just tells him that he failed, but he can still kind of bring himself back up. In the meantime, Rocket comes in, and as he's being chased by the guards, as he decided to just go fuck it and take the Aether from Jane via this thing that pulled it out of her by this thing that guess he stuck her with it and pulled it and managed to suck it out. As such, they're ready to go, and while Thor does try to warn his mother about what happens to her in Thor: The Dark World, she tells him not to tell her a thing because it's her future and he's got his own to worry about. As such, they're getting ready to go back to the present, only for Thor says, "Wait!" He holds out his hand, and Mjolnir comes flying right to his hand, and proving to him that yes, he's still worthy, which is nice. I like that. So with the Reality Stone and Mjolnir in hand, they travel back to the present. As such, the next plot we're going to focus. Okay, and so the next plot we're going to talk about is the Avengers plot, where as we get the iconic scene in the first Avengers film of the Avengers uniting against the Chitauri army. But as they're doing that in a nearby alley, we see Hulk, Ant-Man, Iron Man, and Captain America arriving as all the action is going down. Pretty much, the teams are going to separate. Hulk is going to go to the Sanctum Sanctorum and try to get the Time Stone, while Cap, Iron Man, and Ant-Man will go to the Avengers Tower and try to get the perfect moments to grab the Space and Mind Stones. As such, the group split off, and the Hulk goes to the Sanctum Sanctorum, doing his best to try and impersonate his past counterpart by smashing things and trying to act mad, even though it's just Bruce Banner's mind in the Hulk's body, and, well, yeah, no. As such, he gets the Sanctum Sanctorum, but it's not Doctor Strange that he runs into. He's a few years too early for him. It's instead the Ancient One, who is still alive and for some reason is actually guarding the Sanctum Sanctorum through all this. And I know, big dire thing going on, but isn't she supposed to be guarding their whole order? Thought they had people for this. Either way though, the Hulk says that he's there for the Time Stone, but yeah, she's not exactly willing to hand it over. As when he tries to make a grab for it, she uses that astral projection thing and causes Bruce's spirit to leave his body. And he actually does look like Bruce, while his hulked out body's on the ground. And this pretty much with this, Bruce is now at her mercy, so he's got to kind of come clean and explain the whole situation. However, even when he does explain this to the Ancient One, she's still not exactly willing to give him the Time Stone. And this is kind of where we get into how they kind of say how time travel works in the MCU. In this case, and I think they used time travel before, but don't quote me on that. Sorry. In this case, how time travel works for them is that, put simply, it's multiverse theory. Pretty much what they're going to do is that if they go back in time and they could pretty much go back. How this works is that when the Avengers go back in time and change stuff, it will have no effect on their present. Say for example, say I existed in the MCU and decided to go back in time to World War II and kill Hitler before he could start the Third Reich. While that would put a stop to World War II, when I return to the present, I will have found no record of some nameless blonde kid wearing a lantern ring shooting Hitler. And I will find that World War II still happened, that the Third Reich still occurred, with that same Charlie Chaplin mustache-wearing freak still walking around like nothing happened. And that's because that's because my timeline, the world I came from, it will have been unaffected. I could go. Well, in the timeline I just came from, that world is now bereft of World War II. I've essentially created a parallel universe, an alternate timeline. And so that's kind of how multiverse theory works here, as they can pretty much go as that, and that's which is partly what, but, however, and this is partly why the Ancient One doesn't want to help them, as while giving them the Time Stone would still benefit them, it could ultimately mean problems for her timeline, which I kind of have to agree with, because if she gives him the Time Stone now, it would lead to some crap later, especially within the Doctor Strange movie, since it was utilizing the Time Stone that allowed Doctor Strange to get a win against Dormammu and his followers. It's not time shot. Bruce, however, gives a possible solution to that. He gives a solution to this. If they take to the stones, but then when they're done using them, they just put them right back where they found them, and thus these alternate timelines just go away, and it still becomes their timeline proper all the way through. which the Ancient One does agree with, but she says that it has to be under the condition that they live, and she's still not willing to take that risk. Take that risk because it means that they could still die. And so Bruce says, "Well, if it's such a big risk, then why did Doctor Strange just give it to Thanos?" And so upon hearing this, the Ancient One's like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, when she hears the Doctor Strange just handed it over, it actually starts to get her to reconsider things. As from what she knows of him, Doctor Strange is supposed to be the best. Because though she hasn't met him yet, she's aware that Strange is supposed to be the best one of them all. And so if he willingly handed over the Time Stone, then he must have had a good reason. As such, she decides she just reconsiders her offer and then puts Bruce back in his body and then gives him the Time Stone, hoping that things will work out for them. In the meantime, at Avengers Tower, Cap, Iron Man, and Ant-Man get into position as the Avengers of the past manage to beat Loki, and so they get in there and just kind of get into position. Pretty much what happens is that Cap's plan is that he's going to the elevator because after they took down Loki, the Shield came in to try and get as many resources they can, which in this case was led by Hydra, the Hydra agents, including that one Hydra agent that Cap was friends with the Winter Soldier before we learned he was actually a Hydra agent. As well as this higher up who I remember being a Hydra agent. I don't remember which film he was in. He has glasses and he's bald. I don't remember. Either way, yeah, he's there. Either way, they're there to collect the scepter and put him in a lockup, or in this case, send him to their scientists to the study. While the Avengers take Loki down the elevator, though Hulk is not allowed to join them because he's too big and they hit their weight limit. As such, he's got to take the stairs. In the meantime, things seem to go. In the meantime, Cap manages to get to the elevator where Shield is transporting Loki's staff, and he tells everyone that he's got new orders to get the staff coming from right up from the senator. Of course, these people are not exactly willing to believe them since they didn't get such orders themselves, and we see that even the agents are getting ready to go into battle mode if things don't work out. And even the head agent says that he'll have to call the senator, but Cap is able to dissuade them by saying, "You don't have to do that. You have to do that. Trust me." And then goes forward and leans forward and whispers, "Hail Hydra," which pretty much gets them to hand over the scepter right away, with Cap walking away with a smirk on his face. However, they're still not out of the woods yet, as when the past Avengers go down to the lobby with Loki in prison. With Loki as a prisoner, they're headed off by Alexander Pierce, who as we learn, was still a major part of Hydra. And he wants to take Loki, and he wants to take the Tesseract, which I'm guessing something like this happened in the main timeline as well, and I'm guessing it didn't end well for Hydra since, at the end of that movie, Thor was able to leave with Loki, and since at the time the Bifrost was down, they had to use a Tesseract to get back to Asgard. So, yeah, this wasn't obviously not going to go well. But either way, Tony's managed to steal a guard uniform, and their plan is that, when they arrived at the tower, they managed to flick Ant-Man onto past Tony Stark. And their plan is that Ant-Man is gonna go to the arc reactor on Tony's chest and pretty much give him a mild cardiac arrest by disconnecting a wire and causing him, and just kind of and by disconnecting a wire. In the chaos, he'll drop the case containing the Tesseract, and they'll be able to retrieve it. As such, in the midst of the fighting, Alexander Pierce keeps trying to get the Tesseract away from them because I guess it makes sense. Tesseract, Hydra wants it still, but whatever. Either way, in the midst of the chaos, they give past Tony a cardiac arrest, which causes him to fall over and drop the case, which immediately has them stop all fighting as everyone starts trying to call for a medic. But Ant-Man is able to kick the suitcase away and is able to get it to Tony. However, he's not able to get that far with it, as the Hulk comes bursting down from the stairs and just starts yelling that he had to take them in the first place. As such, the Tesseract gets knocked out of its case, and Loki ends up seeing it and uses it to escape. As such, while past Tony is saved thanks to Thor, they pretty much effed up. And to make matters worse, as Cap is leaving, And as Cap is leaving, he's getting a report of what's going on, and he runs into his past self, who was doing recon at the time. His past self mistakes Cap as Loki, which leads, and so while Cap tries to lightly convince him he's not Loki, it's not going, and they end up getting into a fight. They end up getting into a fight, which caused them to fall off several ledges, get hurt. And I just think to myself, if they didn't have the super soldier serum, they'd be dead. However, as such, Cap tries to get the Loki scepter, as if he can get to it, he can get his past self, he can knock his past self out. But his past self is too skilled, and he gets even more serious when in the midst of a fight, Cap's locket gets knocked out. So past Cap picks it up and wonders, "Where'd you get this?" As such, Cap gets into a choke. Past Cap gives his future counterpart a chokehold, but future Cap is able to stop his past counterpart by saying Bucky is alive, because despite how noble Cap is, he's emotional and attached to his loved ones, and so when he hears that, it allows him to lessen up, which allows Cap to get free, grab Loki's staff, and knock him out. As such, he manages to escape, but it's still a hollow victory, as while they have the time and Mind Stones, they still need the Space Stone, and as Scott mentioned, they only had enough Pym particles for a round trip. So yeah, they don't know where Loki went, and he has the Tesseract, so they're kind of screwed. I'm guessing the Hulk already left because he's not there for this one, and while Cap and Tony are a little upset about this, they do think that there actually is a way that they can do it. They think that there could be a place that might be able to have he thinks that maybe they'll have another shot, as he thinks there might be a place that can not only give them more Pym particles, but could give them another shot at getting the Space Stone. As such, they give Scott Loki's staff, and Tony gives Cap these coordinates where he thinks they can go, and so they poured off while Ant-Man goes back to the present. And it turns out that place is actually a military base in New Jersey around in 1970. Which is also where we get our final MCU Stan Lee cameo, as we see Stan driving by in a car that says "Nuff said" on the back, as he drives by the military base and yells, "Make peace, not war," and drives off. It was great, and it was humorous, and I'm not even kidding. Everyone cheered when they saw that cameo, and I went to see this film in theaters. It was great. As such, Cap and Tony get onto the military base with Tony dressing up in a suit while Cap puts on a military uniform, and their plan is such: they're going to get into the base and then to split up. Cap is going to go to on the base Hank Pym is actually on the base when he's younger, and since Hank Pym was Ant-Man before, odds are he'd have the Pym particles, while Tony goes to where they're keeping the Tesseract, because this base is where Captain America was born. As such, they get in and split up, with Cap managing to distract Hank by saying he's a soldier that tells him a package has arrived, but they can't move it because it's glowing because it's glowing. As it just causes Hank to freak out and run to try and get his quote unquote package, which allows Cap to go in and steal some Pym particles. And a nice little Easter egg is that on Hank's table you can actually see the original Ant-Man helmet. So that's kind of cute. But at the same time, they were spotted by a secretary who realized that they weren't supposed to be on the base, and so when she comes up with soldiers looking for them, he hides in an office, not knowing whose it is, until he sees a picture of himself when he was still scrawny, and it turns out this is Peggy's office. As on the other side of a window, he sees Peggy chewing at a soldier, and it's kind of sad. In the meantime, Tony manages to get to an underground lab where they're keeping the Tesseract, and he's able to use his Iron Man tech, because I'm guessing he still has the chess piece. And he manages to open up the vault and grab the Tesseract and put it in his suitcase. But before he leaves, he ends up running into another blast in the past, Howard Stark, who it turns out at this point in time is actually expecting, as he's got flowers and I think tuna. Don't quote me on that. And as gifts for the missus at the moment she's expecting. Tony kind of freaks out and says that his name is Howard Potts, and so they kind of strike up a conversation. And it's also a nice little tearjerker, as we see Tony having one last moment with his dad, saying that he's trying to assure him that he'll be a good father, things will work out, and while Tony says that his dad While Tony says that he thought his dad was a bit tough, he still only when he thinks back, he remembers the good times. And he managed to give his dad one last hug under the pretense of saying, thank you for all you've done for the country. As such, with the Pym particles and the Space Stone, Cap and Tony are able to make their escape and hit back to the present, which is where we get to our final plot. Which is where we get to the final plot lines. Immediately, hold on a second. Anyway, pretty much to get the space and soul stones. Black Widow, Hawkeye. Like I said, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Nebula, and War Machine went back to 2014 during Guardians of the Galaxy. As such, when they arrived, the groups wound up splitting up, with Nebula and War Machine staying on Morag to try and find Star-Lord when he came to get the Space Stone, while Black Widow and Hawkeye go to Vormir to get the Soul Stone. I'm going to talk about them first because the stuff with Nebula and War Machine actually I think is more important because of what happens later. But in the meantime, they end up going to Vormir in the Guardian ship, and they end up going to the mountain where, like with Thanos and Gamora and Infinity War, they run into the phantom image of the Red Skull. As such, they follow him to the top of the mountain, and he once again gives them the spiel that if they want the Soul Stone, they need to give up something they love, an eternal trade, a soul for a soul, etc. As such, while Hawkeye and Black Widow don't want to fully believe this, they do realize that he's not pulling their legs. As when Thanos got the Soul Stone, he came to this planet with Gamora and left with the Soul Stone, so they think this makes sense. As such, both Hawkeye and Black Widow think that maybe they should be the ones to do it, and I mean the sense of Hawkeye thinks he should sacrifice himself, while Black Widow wants to sacrifice herself instead. And it ultimately leads to a scuffle between the two, as both of them end up fighting over who will sacrifice himself. It ultimately results in Hawkeye knocking Black Widow aside and almost jumping off the cliff, but Black Widow comes in and manages to latch him onto the cliff. Hawkeye tries holding onto her as best as he can, but she says that that she knows she needs to do this, and ultimately sacrifices herself. And people have and I've heard the scene described as a fridging for Black Widow, and in a way it kind of is. But honestly, I think it actually does feel like a cap for her character development. I'm going off on a slight tangent here. Here's the thing. Black Widow's backstory is a dark one. She was... Even in the comics, she started out as a villain before she eventually turned to the good guy, before she became a part of the good guys. But with that said, in the MCU, she was an assassin, one of the best actually, and so her backstory was that when she was doing her thing, Hawkeye was sent to go after her, and when he found her, instead of killing her, he took pity on her and helped her. He helped her get better, grow stronger, and turn her skills towards helping people rather than hurting them, turning her into an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it made her think that maybe she had a family. A place that she could turn to, that she finally and so when she finally turned good, she thought she could finally find a place that she could make good on what she did, make good on all this, be better. And so her ongoing story after the films was just kind of trying to live up to this ideal and be a good person, and for the most part, she was. Anyway, it was even extended in the first event. It was even extended in the Avengers movie when Hawkeye got put under Loki's command. She was trying to save him the same way that she was trying to save him because they were close, and and he was the one that helped her. However, with the events that occurred in Winter Soldier, her faith was kind of shaken a bit, as she thought that she had found a new home with S.H.I.E.L.D., only to learn that S.H.I.E.L.D. was infested with Hydra, and so she thought that everything she had done was for naught. However, she still had the Avengers to fall back on, but even that was still kind of a loose home, as after Civil War, the Avengers got split in half, and while she fought with Iron Man's side, she ultimately sided with Cap in the end, and wound up joining him on the run. But at the end, as such, I feel like this ending with her sacrificing herself for Hawkeye, I think it makes total sense. Through all this, she has managed to come out on top in the end. She now leads the Avengers. She keeps everything coordinated. She does actually try to keep everything stable. While Hawkeye is the one that's fallen off the rails. With the loss of his family, all the ideals that he helped her reach, he has lost. And throughout the first half of this movie, she's trying to find him and bring him back to the side of the angels. because she cares about him and wants what's best for him. It's just that he can't get past what happened to his family, and it's just putting him down a dark path. As such, this final moment is her doing everything she can to save her friend, her family. Finally giving him finally giving her life to save his own, give him back what he deserved. And I think it's a nice little roundabout way that caps off a character. I do think that there could be more to it, and I understand the arguments for why people can say it's a fridging. But honestly, I don't care that. I think it's also a very heartfelt, as she's trying to save this person that helped save her, bring him up from darkness the same way he brought her out of, and it's sad, and I think it's touching. It definitely brings the feels and the drama, and I think it actually does work. And at the end of the day, while for the sacrifice, just like with Thanos in Infinity War, Hawkeye wakes up in the pool on the bit far away from the cliff with the Soul Stone in his hand. But of course, the final plot element that needs to be addressed is what happens with Nebula and War Machine. As they said, they're still trying to track down. I had the name and I lost it. Forget it. Either they pretty much followed Star Lord when he came to get the Power Stone, and their plan was just to follow him till he got to the Temple of the Power Stone, and then they were just gonna knock him out and take the Power Stone himself. As such, we get this humorous scene where just like in Guardians of the Galaxy, just like in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, we see Star Lord coming in and listening to his jams and just dancing out. Only briefly, only like only like 2/3 of the way through the song, it cuts to War Machine and Nebula's point of view as they're just watching him dancing and singing along, and yeah, he looks like a dork. Either way, though, they knock him out and take his lockpick to try and break into the Temple of the Power Stone, and so they get in and they're able to take it out with little efforts and with very little problems because much of Nebula's body is metallic. However, just before they're able to go away, just before they're able to teleport out, Nebula has a problem. War Machine doesn't see it because he teleports out just before she does, but she has a breakdown and suddenly something's going wrong. And that's because she's kind of got a hacker. You see, when future Nebula arrived back in time, it wound up having an effect on this time's Nebula, as their neural networks are working through the same system. As such, while future Nebula and War Machine were on Morag waiting for Peter, past Gamora and Nebula were on a planet fighting on Thanos' behalf. As such, as they're fighting through, they eventually arrive back on the ship because well, this is just more Guardians of the Galaxy, as Thanos is going to go send Ronan as Thanos is preparing to send Ronan to go and get the Power Stone. However, just before he can send Gamora and Nebula to go help him, because, well, that's what he did, the past Nebula has a breakdown, and suddenly she starts seeing the images of what future Nebula is seeing. As such, Thanos starts wondering what's going on, so he has her brought up to his ship, where that creepy psychic guy that Iron Man called Squidward actually managed to hack into her network and discovers the existence of future Nebula, and they're able to hack into their memories since they both run on the same neural network. As such, Thanos ends up looking through future Gamora's memories, and he's able to figure out what the Avengers are, and he's able to find the Avengers, which originally when I saw this film I wondered how he knew who the Avengers was, but then I remembered, oh yeah, he bankrolled Loki's attack on Earth, Loki's invasion on Earth, so yeah, it makes sense that he know who the Avengers are. And what's actually and just kind of amusing little thing, when he sees the Avengers, he sees them with disdain, just calls them, and he just looks at them and reacts with disdain. However, he is able to put together the neural network they're receiving is Nebula from the future, and so he starts scanning through their memories and ultimately manages to piece together what the Avengers are doing. That they've come back in time, that in the future he succeeded in his plan. That he got all 6 Infinity Stones and then he wiped out half the universe, and that the reason that future Nebula is here is because she changed sides and she's trying to help them get the Infinity Stone so they can undo it. Especially when he sees his future self talking, and even I, saying that I didn't. It's like what is done. It's like I. It's like what is like it is done. It can. It is not. It cannot be undone. I am inevitable. Before he gets his head chopped off. Well, initially the psychic got. Initially Squidward wants to kill Nebula since future Nebula is a traitor. Thanos instead sees this as an opportunity, as he ends up going. He gets to Morag, and from her breakdown, future Nebula figures out that Thanos knows they're there and knows what they're doing. However, instead of doing the sensible thing and just porting the hell out of there with the time band, instead she lets herself get captured by the ship and gets beaten up by her past counterpart, who takes the time band. And a bit of her skull and a bit of her cybernetics, specifically the aesthetic stuff, as over the 5 years since the end of Infinity War, she had gotten some adjustments made. As such, she gives a vial of Pym particles to Thanos, and pretty much what the plan is that they're going to send future Nebula in her place to act as a double agent. As such, she goes back to the present day as the Avengers now are assembled with all the 6 Infinity Stones. And when they see that Black Widow is not with them, it doesn't really go well for a lot of the members, Hulk and Hawkeye included. And while the group does mourn, they do still have to worry about. They still think that they still need to worry about getting everybody back. Though Thor says they can bring them back, though Hawkeye says that no, it was a permanent trade. We can't get her back. We're done. Which also kind of it does kind of suck. Either way, though, they are able to take the 6 Infinity Stones that they gathered, and they start putting them together onto a new Infinity Gauntlet that Tony made. This one for the right hand. As such, once it's all completed, the question is raised, who's going to use it? Because, they saw what this thing did to Thanos. The first time he did it fried the gauntlet, and the second time he used it, it nearly killed him. So, whoever's going to use that they needs to be able to withstand all that power. That Thor initially volunteers because he wants to try and make right for how he failed in Infinity War, but they think that no, he couldn't survive it. To which the Hulk says that no. To which the Hulk says that he'll do it because he's got mostly gamma radiation flowing through him, so he should be able to withstand the energy. As such, they tell him. Tony pretty much tells him, just bring everybody back from 5 years ago. Don't change anything else. Just do that. As such, the Hulk is able to take the Infinity Gauntlet and puts it on, and the instant he puts it on, it just starts sending energy flowing through his body that is hurting him. Meanwhile, as the group is distracted with this, past Nebula goes to the time machine and activates it, activates it, allowing Thanos and his ship to come flying through into the present day. But despite this, despite all the pain he's in, the Hulk is able to get his fingers clenched. And so he snaps, causing an explosion, which causes him to pass out. And I'm guessing pretty much drains all the gamma out of his arm and reduces it kind of to a shriveled husk. He's still alive, thankfully, as the only damage he sustained was his arm, but otherwise he was able to go through with it. And we do get short confirmation later that he succeeded when Hawkeye's phone starts ringing, and it's from his wife. However, this victory is very short-lived, as the Hulk is on the ground recovering. He looks up through their glass ceiling and sees Thanos' ship just raise the frack out of Avengers Mansion, almost completely obliterating it with everybody inside. As such, everyone just kind of gets thrown all over the place and ends up in different situations. And pretty much the end result is that we get War Machine, Rocket, and the Hulk all in this underground area that's slowly being flooded, and the only thing that's keeping them from being crushed under all the rubble is the Hulk, who's keeping it all up. Ant-Man is still alive too, and managed to get. And when everything went down, he managed to shrink down, so he was safe. But he's the only one picking up their their SOS as the chamber they're in is being slowly filled up. Hawkeye also managed to get out of it okay, and he managed to find the Infinity Gauntlet. But it turns out when Thanos razed the whole place to the ground, he also unleashed a buttload of Chitauri. And so Hawkeye starts running away with the Infinity Gauntlet while these things are after them. And in the meantime, on the surface, we see that Cap, Thor, and Iron Man are still in one piece. And after he raised the Avengers Mansion, Thanos came down and met up with past Nebula, ordering her to go in and get him the Infinity Gauntlet while he sat there and waited. As such, while she's gone, Thor, Cap, and Iron Man go up there and meet him, and they are smart enough to realize that this is probably a trap. But that at the same time, they also realize that Thanos doesn't have the Infinity Stones. They need to keep it that way. And so Thor says, then let's kill him properly this time, as he holds a bow to his hands and calls Mjolnir and Stormbreaker to him, getting him back in his kick-ass superhero outfit while also braiding up his hair. As the three go to confront Thanos, and he says what I think is one of the best lines in this movie: "You could not live with your failure. And where did that bring you? Back to me." As such, he then tells them that he wants to thank them, because now with his knowledge of the future, he knows that no matter what he does, no matter what his intentions are, he knows that even if he accomplishes his goal, there are still going to be people that resist him, that want to undo his work, and will go to any lengths he can to do it. And so he decides to adopt a new strategy, which in this case is wipe the board clean and then start over. I'm not even joking. He still wants the Infinity Gauntlet, but in this case, he wants to use it to wipe away the universe, and then replace it with a new one that's teeming with life and full of enough resources that everyone can share. While I don't have a problem with the second part, while I do sympathize with the second part, it's the first part that I kind of have a problem with. And yeah, it does kind of shoot in the foot his motivation in the last one, but by the same token, he is still trying to adopt his strategy, as he realizes that even if he succeeds, there are people that are still going to be fighting back. As such, so yeah, and he's still really kick-ass to watch, especially when he's not acting with arrogance here. He's not acting with anger or malice. Not acting with anger. He's still just as calm and cool and collected about this as he was in Infinity War. And so the Avengers say the Avengers say you can't. It's like you're gonna build a world on bloodshed. And it's like they won't know. They won't know. They won't know, especially when you three won't be alive to tell them. And so it leads to a very kick-ass fight as Thor, Cap, and Iron Man all just gang up on Thanos, and it's very clear that while this gives them a better chance than they had before, Thanos is still very skilled even without the Infinity Stones. So this is still not going well for them. However, back on Thanos' ship, Gamora is actually watching all this, and while Future Nebula was captured, she actually was able to tell Gamora about her future a bit, namely how, in order to get the Soul Stone, Thanos had to sacrifice her. However, with this in mind, with all the chaos and destruction going on, Gamora wants to know about her future and about how it happens with them. And so Nebula explains that originally she wanted to kill her and how she tried, but at the end, Gamora managed to convince Nebula to join them, and they ultimately grew closer and ultimately accepted each other as sisters. And just hearing that very much gives Gamora the strength that she needs to fight against Thanos, as at the end of the day, Gamora is Gamora. While she may feign loyalty to Thanos, even she knows this is nuts, and even in the original Guardians, she was planning to betray him, so now that she has her sister by her side, she's ready to face all this. In the meantime, back in Avengers Manor, Hawkeye is still facing off against the Chitauri, but he manages to escape, and he manages to try and take a breath, only for past Nebula to come up and take the Infinity Gauntlet. However, before she can get too far, Gamora and Future Nebula come in, and they hold her at gunpoint and try to convince her to change sides, that there is still good in her, that she can do this. But she says that no, I can't change. He won't let me. Just as she tries to attack Gamora as past Nebula tries to attack Gamora, past Nebula tries to attack Gamora, Future Nebula shoots her. As such, they still have the Infinity Gauntlet. The threes now have the Infinity Gauntlet. In the meantime, though, back on the outside, Cap, Thor, and Iron Man are still doing everything they can to fight against Thanos, but it's still turning into a losing battle. As Thanos managed to knock aside both Iron Man and Cap, and now he's facing against Thor. Thor tries fighting him as well, but in the end result, his hammer, both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker get knocked out of his hands, and so it's just him fighting one-on-one. And as he's being cornered by Thanos, he tries to bring Stormbreaker in to fight him, but Thanos manages to grab Stormbreaker and tries pushing it closer and closer in to try and kill Thor, only for Mjolnir to rise up and fly over. Only it doesn't land in Thor's hand. It lands in Cap's hand. And yes, that was just a kick-ass moment, seeing Cap as worthy of wielding Mjolnir. And while he may not have to have training with it, he just starts proceeding to kick ass with it, using it to fight off Thanos, calling down the power of Thor, summoning lightning, blasting him. It is so freaking awesome. But unfortunately, this awesome upgrade is still not enough to face Thanos, as he's even still able to knock Mjolnir out of Cap's hand and just starts chopping away at Cap's shield until it's practically broken. As such, with Cap on the ground, Thanos calls in his... Cap does get up, and so Thanos calls in his army of his acolytes and his Chitauri army. So, and at this point, it looks like that Cap's kind of screwed. But even then, he's still willing to stand up and fight against Thanos. That is, until he gets a radio transmission from Sam Wilson. Falcon, sorry. Who tells him to check his left. And when he turns, he sees a magical portal open up, and from it comes T'Challa, Okoye, and Shuri. And they're not the only ones. As behind them we see an army of Wakandan warriors. And from them, suddenly more portals open up as we see Wakandan ships appearing. We see more heroes start flooding in from all around. We see not just Wakandans. I know there was more. We see sorcerers and legions of sorcerers coming in, arming themselves with magic, including with Wong. And from them, we see even more heroes, including the ones that were destroyed in the snap. We see Doctor Strange coming in from Titan with the Guardians of the Galaxy hot on his heels. We see Spider-Man swinging in and getting in position, and I'm not even kidding. People in the theater freaking cheered when he swung in when I was there. They freaking cheered because it was goddamn Spider-Man. And just more heroes start coming in. Wasp, Ant-Man manages to come up with... Ant-Man managed to grow to giant size, allowing him, Hulk, Rocket, and War Machine to get free from the debris. Falcon comes flying in, ready to fight. Who else? I know it was just. And we see the Winter Soldier come walking in just casually with a gun on his arm. We see Valkyrie flying in on a Pegasus. It is such a fucking kick-ass scene. And to top it all off, Cap, as the army stands ready to fight against Thanos and his forces, Cap just stands there and yells out, "Avengers!" And Mjolnir flies to his hand. He looks up and says in a whisper, "Assemble." And the battle begins. And I'm not even kidding. This scene right here, right now, is probably the most kick-ass scene in the entire MCU. Bar none. Now, I might be presumptuous about saying this, because I know there's going to be more MCU movies after this, since I know there are going to be more MCU movies that they're going to make. But right now, as of today, as of the time I'm recording this, no scene comes close to this one. We have had plenty of kick-ass scenes throughout the MCU. Even the first Avengers movie was really cool, and having it unite all the heroes that we had seen prior, and having them fight against an army of invading monstrosities from space. Even Infinity War had some really kick-ass scenes with the war. But this right here is the most kick-ass climax I've ever seen. It's not just a small group of heroes this time. It is pretty much every single hero that we are aware of in the MCU, aside from the ones from the TV shows, all fighting side by side, ready to face what could possibly be their final battle, as they know if they lose this battle, Thanos will destroy everything. And it is so glorious. And it's not just superheroes. It's armies of trained power. It's armies of allies and soldiers, all from Wakanda, from space, from just sorcerers, mixing science, magic, and fantasy, all rolled into one. It is so kick-ass and awesome. It's got great visuals, seeing them all fighting and going after all these all these monsters. It is just so goddamn awesome. And honest to God, nothing. I don't think anything could top it. You can try, but I don't think it could. But I digress. Despite all this awesome, Hawkeye still has the Infinity Gauntlet, and they know that they need to keep these stones away from Thanos. However, Bruce tells them that they need to get it back. They need to get the stones back to the past. Unfortunately, the time machine was destroyed when the time machine was completely destroyed when Thanos raised the manor. However, they still have another time machine, and it turns out that Scott's van is still in one piece, as it still has the quantum tunneler in there. Unfortunately, though, they have to still they still have to cross an entire army of these monsters and monstrosities that are completely loyal to Thanos to get it there. So, yeah, it's gonna be an uphill battle. But Hawkeye manages to pass the gauntlet on the Black Panther, who managed to run across the entire field before he hands it off to Spider-Man, who managed to get a ride from Valkyrie. Managed to get a ride from Valkyrie, and I forgot it was someone else too. I don't know. Valkyrie, Cap throwing Mjolnir. They're trying to do the best they can to fight it off, and Thanos sees what they're doing and tries to get the gauntlet, but he's ultimately stopped by Scarlet Witch, who is just pissed at him because the last time she saw him, he killed her robo boyfriend. And while this Thanos has never actually met her, since this is Thanos from Guardians of the Galaxy, the grudge still holds true, as she uses her powers to pretty much just start raining hell on him with rocks and debris, before ultimately raising up and start ripping his armor apart with her powers, which ultimately causes Thanos to just call down a raining fire on them from his ships. Then while one of his acolytes, the sword guy, tries telling them that this could kill their own troops, he says, do it anyway. And yeah, it does start turning the tide of war in his favor. Turning the tide of battle in his favor, as many of the heroes get knocked aside. Oh yeah! One more thing I forgot to mention. Pepper is here! And we see her in her Iron Person suit, and I'm gonna call her the Iron Maiden. Why? Because that's a kick-ass name! I don't care if her official name is Iron Woman. I don't give a damn. I'm going with Iron Maiden. That's a better name. Her name is Iron Maiden for me. And we get plenty of scenes of her kicking ass alongside Tony. It's just... Look, I'm sorry. I can't... I'll get into this at the end of it. I'll get into this when I'm done with my spoiler plot summary. Either way, though, it looks like with the raining fire, that the heroes are screwed until Tony gets a ring that something's entering Earth's atmosphere. And that something is Captain Marvel, flying right through the ship and just destroying it. As the tide of battle seems to be turning more into their favor as Captain Marvel comes in to take the gauntlet from Peter, and so she and various other superpowered women from the MCU, and Mantis, which I'm not saying all this way Mantis is a character, it's just that, well, the rest of the women there are very capable and very powerful, and while Mantis has more empathic powers, and I don't hate Mantis. She's useful and she's a good character. It's just that in a battle like this, I don't see how she could compare to the other ladies in the group. But either way, they all take it and they start passing it along with Wasp, Captain Marvel, Valkyrie, Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden, Shuri, all of them just passing along and fighting through the monsters until they ultimately tried getting it to Scott's van. But Thanos managed to get, but just before they can get it into the quantum tunnel, Thanos grabs his blade and tosses it right at the van, completely destroying it. As such, the explosion pretty much sent everybody that was nearby flying back, and at this point, Tony sees what's happening. Tony pretty much saw what was going on and tries making a run for the Infinity Gauntlet, but Thanos manages to knock him aside and tries grabbing it. He tries getting Captain America and tries fighting him off, and all the heroes try to doing the best they can, including Cap, but he keeps knocking them aside just easily one by one until he manages to finally get the gauntlet on his hand. He gets ready to, and he's even getting ready to snap and wipe out the universe when Carol comes in and starts fighting him off, trying to keep the glove open, and she manages to use her full front of her power to actually overpower the gauntlet. And while Thanos tries not, to which Thanos, not still being smart, decides, well, if I can't use the whole thing, then I'll use a part of it. As he grabs the Power Stone right off of it, charges up on its power, and uses that combined might to just knock Carol aside In the midst of this, Tony looks at Doctor Strange, who's been dealing with kind of a flood. And earlier in the fight, Tony asked him if this was the future where this was the one future among 14 million that they won, and which Doctor Strange said, if I tell you what's going to happen, then it won't happen. And so at this point, Tony sees Doctor Strange, and he holds up one finger, showing that this is it. As such, as Thanos puts the Power Stone back in the gauntlet and he gets ready to snap, Tony runs up to him and makes a grab at the gauntlet. Ultimately, Thanos manages to knock him aside again, and so he looks at Tony and he just says, I am inevitable. Holds up his hand, but this time, nothing happens, much to even his confusion. He turns his hand over to see what's going on and finds that all the Infinity Stones are gone. And as he looks at Tony in horror, Tony holds up his hand and shows that when he grabbed the gauntlet, he managed to transfer all the Infinity Stones to his armor, which makes sense. He made the gauntlet in this case. And so, with a look of horror on Thanos' face, Tony gets his fingers ready and says with an exasperated breath, and I am Iron Man. And so with that snap, the battle ends. One by one, Thanos' forces start turning to dust. And it's actually and just like with the scene in Infinity War, it's beautiful and it's actually very beautiful and slightly horrific to see, but it's actually really amazing, especially with what it took to get to this scene. And so Thanos, looking around in horror, he realizes now that he has lost. That despite everything he struggled to do, he is lost. And so rather than yelling out and crying no, vowing revenge, trying to take the heroes down with him, he instead accepts this defeat, sits down, and wait, and then just silently accepts his fate as he too turns to dust. However, this is not however, despite this victory, there is still another loss. As was shown with Thanos previously and with the Hulk, utilizing the Infinity Stones to that degree can have a major feedback on the user. And so while Iron Man was able to use the stones to annihilate Thanos and his forces, it pretty much just left him in critical condition. He managed to crawl away and huddle down, at which point his loved ones come to him and see him. With Peter coming in, tearfully telling him, "We won, Mr. Stark. We won, Tony." Before he steps aside, as Pepper comes up, asks Friday what his state is. She tells him he's in critical condition. And Pepper looks at her dying husband and says, "You did good. You can take your rest now." And so the lights on Tony's armor fade as Iron Man dies. And honestly, I think this is a really great way. Honestly, I think it really works. It's poetic in a way. It was with Iron Man's debut that the MCU began. And so with his death closes the first big chapter in the MCU. Not the Phase 3, but of this part of the MCU. Afterwards, we get our epilogues. Epilogues being plural here. Do mean it as we see that in the midst of all this chaos, we see that T'Challa and Shuri have gone back to Wakanda and are now with their mother again. We see Scott and Hope sitting on the patio with Cassie, right, with Cassie, and just enjoying themselves. We see Peter returning to high school as the people who disappeared are back, and Peter goes to see Ned again, and just kind of, and we finally now see a funeral for Tony, as we see that Tony, before he went back in time, recorded one final message in case he didn't survive. As he told everyone, even finally giving the last words in the message to his daughter Morgan, saying, "I love you 3,000." As such, to commemorate as a final commemoration, Pepper takes Tony's first arc reactor, the one that he used to help keep the electromagnet in place to keep his heart beating, and they let it float away on a lake, as the various heroes attend the funeral, including the ones that have been brought back, as well as and another little fun fact that was actually pointed out to me. Apparently, the kid from Iron Man 3 is also there. You know, the kid that Tony wound up crashing into. Apparently, he's there, and I do see him. He's older, and even in the back, we see that Nick Fury has returned as well. Because why not? As such, with Tony's death, with Tony's death, we see Happy talking to Morgan, and we see that Happy is ready to step up and take care of Morgan as well. Take care of her like he took care of her father. And so we then go to New Asgard as Valkyrie is asking Thor when he'll come back, and Thor says that he's probably got to go, that he has to go, and that he needs to kind of discover his own path, and that New Asgard kind of already has its own ruler, as he names Valkyrie as the new queen of New Asgard. I know they say king, but she's a woman, so it's gonna be queen. Either way, she's in a position of power, and she's a natural born leader. Though even she said she's gonna make some changes. In the meantime, Thor goes to join the Guardians of the Galaxies. They head out, and we see that Peter is actually going to try and look for Gamora. As in a deleted scene, it turns out we learn that Gamora is still around. She wasn't destroyed with Thanos' forces, and she made a quick getaway. So she's probably out. So she's probably out there, and she's probably out there, and this actually led to a funny scene during the battle. As when Peter saw Gamora, he actually was tearful, and for him, it was like it was seeing his loved one again. But keep in mind, this was pre-Guardians Gamora, and so she immediately hits him in the nut, and so she immediately kicks him in the nuts. And when she sees him, she even asks Nebula, "Wait, this is the guy you were telling me about?" And so Nebula responds with, "Oh, it was either him or a tree," which, yeah, that's amusing. Either way, though, Thor pretty much arrives and says that here we are, the Asgardians of the Galaxy, and immediately starts trying to assert his own authority on the ship, to which he and Peter continue having their cock contest. And so our final scene is where we see Cap taking the various Infinity Stones, as well as Mjolnir, and going through a new time machine to try and put them back to their respective times. Though in some cases, I think those timelines are kind of screwed. Like the timeline where they got the time and Mind Stones, that's kind of screwed since Loki escaped in that timeline. And the timeline where they got the power and Soul Stones, that timeline's been drastically altered, as now it's not only missing its Gamora, but it's Thanos too. And while that probably may be a good thing in the long run, it's still a very major change. So, yeah, I don't think putting the stones back in those realities is going to make things better. Especially since in the one where they got the time and mind stones, they now think the Shield agency of that reality thinks that Cap is one of them. So yeah. But either way, yeah, Cap takes Mjolnir and them as he gets a goodbye from his friends. We even get a nice callback as Bucky goes up to him and tells him, "Don't do anything stupid." While as Cap tells him, "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone," and Bucky says, "Don't worry, it's okay. You'll be taking all the stupid with you." And so Cap gets on the time machine and goes back. As such they count down since he should be returning in 5 seconds. But even when the time machine powers up, Cap doesn't seem to be returning. They're wondering if something's gone wrong with it. To which Bucky looks over to the lake and says, "No, look over." He says, "Sam, look over there." As such, he and Sam go to check by the lake, and they see an old man there. And yep, this is Cap. It turns out that after he dropped all the Infinity Stones off and returned Mjolnir, he decided that maybe it was time he get his own life. As such, he used the time machine and went back to go be with Peggy. And you can easily say that this kind of screws up the timeline as well, as he wasn't supposed to be there. But if you actually watched an early, if you like I mentioned briefly in Civil War, that the idea is that this was always going to happen. So Cap really was there the whole time, especially since in Civil War one of the pallbearers was an old man in white that you only saw in the back. So the implication was that was Captain America. And even Peggy most likely had to keep it a secret, because at least Cap had to tell her enough so that Cap had to tell her enough so that he had to disappear for all those years. But at the same time, despite the changes that this brings, I'm not against it at all. Cap Cap fought just as hard as Tony to save the world, and I honestly think that he deserves this. As such, he's now old, and while you can make the argument that he could use the time machine to turn into a kid again, but let's be honest here, I don't think he'd want that. Or make him younger, sorry. And Sam even says that while he's happy for him, it's going to be weird to be in a world without Captain America. To which Cap says oh yeah, that reminds me, and so he pulls out his shield and hands it to Sam, saying that he thinks that he thinks it fits him, which will ultimately pay off in a TV series that we will never discuss on the MCU perspectives, because I said I was only talking about the movies. And as such, the film ends as we cut back to the 1940s in a little house, as we hear music playing in the background, and we see that Cap and Peggy have finally been able to get their dance. And it's really touching. Until you realize that Cap had to keep his mouth shut for years about a lot of major events just to ensure that he wound up in the proper timeline again. Let's go. Well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad, right? So, what do I think of this movie? I admit, plot-wise, it kind of does have a few problems here and there, but on the whole, I think this is still a really amazing movie for the MCU. And that might just be my inner fan, and that might just be my MCU fanboy talking, but yeah, this movie I think does a really good job with what it has. It's not perfect by any means. For starters, because of the 5-year time skip, it does kind of make for some things to be a bit jumpy. And as a result of this, it allows them to kind of go in different directions with characters that, while it is cool to see in some areas, it also leads to some weird changes. For example, a complaint that people had with this movie is how they handled the Hulk. In that, in the previous films, what was cool about him was that he was a big green monster that just lived to smash things. But yet in this film, he's Bruce Banner's in the driver's seat 24/7, and so he's not really as smashy, we'll put it. I kind of will jump to the defense that so I think it works because in a way this is sort of a progression of of Bruce's own character journey, as it involves him learning in this way he's learned to accept the Hulk and actually take on its strengths, and to the point where he's actually willing to become the Hulk. But I also understand everybody else's problems with it. And in a way, it does feel a little weird and awkward seeing Bruce as the Hulk just constantly going around. And of course, there are some minor things that because it's time travel and they don't have to be limited by certain aspects. Even How It Should Have Ended has talked about this in certain jokes. Like when they did the time travel thing, they could have just gone back in time to before Thanos destroyed the stones and then just killed them and took the stones right then and there. But for what we got here, it was still a really good journey. I think it was a really good journey, and honestly, I think it really did well. I think what really worked about this film, in a way, was the fan service. This is a film that definitely paid tribute to. I think that definitely paid tribute to what came before it. Not just acknowledging all the big films that happened before with the time travel thing, but even major callbacks and even wrapping up certain story arcs, especially with Cap and Iron Man, as this is pretty much the last time we are ever going to be seeing them in the MCU. As with Iron Man, we see that that he's grown up from the man that was just an arrogant playboy who liked to roll the dice and act all high and mighty because he could. Now we actually see him, as we see that he's now moved on. He's married the woman that was that originally his secretary. They're living a happy life, and he has a daughter whom he loves. We see, and I like seeing that argument. I like seeing that. I like seeing him debating whether he should help, and I like seeing him reuniting with the Avengers over this common goal. I like seeing the drama that comes from Cap seeing the past and Peggy, and then ultimately deciding that he wants to go back there. Yes, you can make the argument that it's a selfish decision, and in a way it is, but at the same time, I think he deserves it. Throw a dog a bone. I don't give a damn if he actually doesn't. I don't give a damn if it somehow messes up the space-time continuum. Give Cap this break. I don't care what happens. I don't care what's supposed to happen. Damn it, Haley! Why can't you let him have this? Sorry. Personal thing right there. You can decide whether or not that was played up for drama. But it's a really nice moment, and it definitely tugs at the heartstrings, because when I rewatched these movies and remembered this scene, when I got to Captain America and I saw him and Peggy talking about dancing, and I remembered this, it just kind of made my heart hurt. So finally seeing them get to share a dance together, just like they said they always wanted, and them just being happy and being just with Cap holding Peggy in his arms, and her just smiling as she's now with the man she loves. It's beautiful, and it's really, really nice. And there are still plenty of other emotional moments and arcs that go through the movie, predominantly the stuff with Black Widow and Hawkeye. Now you could make the now once again I've already addressed the whole Black Widow being fridge thing in my regard and my opinion on it, but it is in fact I think it is a really good arc. As we see, Hawkeye has grown. Just as we see how low Hawkeye has fallen thanks to what happened to his family, and Black Widow's journey to try and bring him back to the light, and ultimately it's her sacrifice that helps him get back the very thing that he lost. It's touching, and that even her death, while it doesn't get as much weight as Iron Man's death, it's still definitely up. It still definitely managed to cause some significant drama, especially when they do reveal it can't be undone. As even Bruce admitted that when he wanted to used the Infinity Gauntlet to bring back everyone that Thanos got rid of, he tried bringing her back as well, and it just didn't work. So yeah, things are definitely still. So yeah, and it definitely, and in a way, it kind of all of this coming together makes it feel like that this film does have more finality to it. Now, but again, there are also some other things I mentioned, and on top of that, I think one of the best things, I love the effects in this movie, and once again, going back to how it is just complete and total fan service, it pretty much brings back almost everybody from all the previous films, with like some exceptions, of course. Like we get to see the Ancient One return back in the back when they go back when they go back to the first Avengers movie. We get to actually see her interacting with the newer group with these characters. We get to see Natalie Portman comes back, if just for a brief cameo, and even the climax. And then the climax just has so much going on. I didn't even get into I tried to talk about as much as I could, but I know I missed some stuff. Like there was the scene with all the women superheroes getting ready to fight. I know I missed Nebula and Gamora there. I know that there were certain superheroes that were there. Hell, in that big group scene, apparently Howard the Duck was there. And I only just learned this like yesterday. I'm not even kidding. And I completely forgot to look for him too. I really wish I had seen him. I want to see Howard the Duck. I know that's weird to say, but I kind of want to see it. And of course, there's that kick-ass finale, which I think really puts the kibosh on everything. And on top of that, we still have Thanos. And the film, and here's the thing, because this film is a two-parter, because the film that it precedes, it had such a downer, heavy ending to it, this film kind of has a lot going for it, because in a way, the audience is kind of in the same mindset as the heroes. Like I said, while we did know that the people were going to be brought back, were going to be brought back because they were going to be making more films with them, the way the film sets it, it really does make you question whether they can. Because like I said, Thanos won at the end of Infinity War. He did his job, and then with his destruction of the Infinity Stones in the beginning of this movie, it pretty much cemented his victory. They couldn't undo it. And the fact that the film had to jump ahead 5 years and they still hadn't managed to find a way to undo it, it shows just how badly this affected them. Seeing how it affected certain members of the Avengers. How some were able to move on while others are still clean, while some are clean their lives and others have fallen into despair. It's very tragic in a way, and part of that film is seeing them get back up. I already mentioned Hawkeye, but then there's the stuff with Thor. Seeing him go from this high and mighty warrior god to this fat guy who only goes down to his king, only goes down among his subjects to get beer. Who's so emotionally traumatized by what happened with Thanos that he doesn't even want to hear his name anymore. To the only reason to when he is supposed to go with his mission, he can't think straight, and he just wants to go see his mom. It's sad. And he only manages to get his nerves back when he actually has a chance of doing something right, or when he's finally gotten the chance to confront Thanos again. Speaking of which, I loved how they brought Thanos back in. The instant they showed him on the screen, I was actually afraid that he would get involved. And then when he learned about what the Avengers were doing, it just continued elevating things and continued showing just how strong of a villain Thanos is. As with the clues that he got from peeking into future Nebula's memory, he was able to piece together what the Avengers were doing and how he could stop it and take advantage of the situation. True, it also involved some stupidity on future Nebula's part. I think I still keep confusing Nebula and Gamora's names. I'm sorry if I did that throughout this vlog. But even when he ultimately does win, he knows that the Avengers have the Infinity Stones for him, and he knows that if he doesn't take care of them, it's gonna come back and bite him. But even here, it shows that he's still a viable threat even without the stones, as 3 of the Avengers' biggest hitters, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, are still no chance against him. It's just, oh my god. It's just, oh my god. Even when Cap gets a hold of Mjolnir, it's still not enough. And even when we get that kick-ass fight at the end, Thanos still keeps pulling up new tricks. Still managed to try and... Even when it looks like the fight's going in the hero's favor, Thanos managed to turn it back around. The tensions really got your heart beating, and because you knew this wasn't an easy fight to win. They lost it already, and they only just now managed to undo it. And now here Thanos was again, ready to undo that win, and do something even worse than before. It definitely raises the tension, raises the stakes, because you definitely get the feeling that the heroes could lose this time, because they already lost to this guy before. So now that he's here, even without the Infinity Stones, he's still getting wins on them. Even when they do start striving and getting victories, when they do manage to get the gauntlet away from him, when they're charging forward and almost getting close to the van, Thanos keeps heading them off. The fact that he's able to crack Cap's shield, the fact that he's able to destroy the Thing, even when their biggest heavy hitter, Captain Marvel, comes in and tries fighting him when he gets the Infinity Gauntlet, he still shows how smart he is, as he's able to take advantage of the situation, decides to use one of the Infinity Stones out of the others, namely the Power Stone, use it to magnify his own power into knocking her back. It still shows that he's still resourceful, that he's strong, that he's powerful. And even in this whole thing with how much effort he's going to after the Avengers, even he admits that while he takes no pleasure in any of the destruction he's caused, he is going to enjoy this a lot. It definitely still raises the stakes of what came before, and the film definitely has ways of keeping it going. Even seeing this film again, I was super pumped when things kept going wrong, and while it is so satisfying seeing Thanos finally trounced in the end, you do know it was this close that if they had just screwed one thing up, then they would have lost again. They only managed to win by getting lucky. They only managed to win because Tony Stark managed to go in, grab at the gauntlet, and because he made the gauntlet, he was able to interact with it and get the stones out of it and into his armor. They only won by the skin of their pants. It wasn't an easy victory. Thanos didn't lose hard, but the fact that they were able to beat him, get this final victory over him, finally made everything feel worth it. And the final scene with Thanos, I think, is just as beautifully horrific as it was in Infinity War. As just like in Infinity War, just like with the heroes watching their loved ones die off in Infinity War, you see Thanos just standing there distraught, seeing all of his forces turning to dust around him, and he just sits down and so he just sits down and accepts defeat, knowing that at this point he's already lost. Nothing he can do now can fix any of this. It's truly tragic, and I like it. And it's just a great way to end things. And I think it's just a great way to end things. Even the ending with Tony, I think, is really emotional too, as we see all the characters reacting to his death. And we know how the world, and with what happened with Cap, you have to wonder how will the world operate in a world without two of its biggest heroes in it. It's definitely interesting. On top of that, the time travel plot, I think, does make well for some creative elements, as it, again, like as I said, it is fan wanky and definitely allows them to revisit and pay respects to the history and I've heard people say that by introducing the time travel element, you pretty much means that they can now do whatever the hell they want. Like, they could go back and grab Black Widow from before she went time traveling and then just bring her to the present. To which I respond with, no, they can't. As they said in the movie, as they said in this, altering anything would just create a parallel timeline, and in turn, it wouldn't screw over their present. It would in turn screw over that present, which is something they don't want to do. Which is why Bruce made a point of returning the Infinity Stones back to their proper times when they were done, because then it would put everything back in order for all those other timelines. Though again, they already screwed up two of them, so why even stop at this point? And so even if they wanted to go back in, so for example, even if they wanted to go back in time and like grab Black Widow from before she died, or any of the other people that died, it would still be considered a death and a loss. The loss for those other heroes. And what do you think they would do, learning that some heroes from another timeline or future went and kidnapped their loved ones just because they failed to protect their own versions of them? Hell, doubly so for Black Widow. Like, if they went back in time and got her before she could go back in time, then it would mean that the Avengers of that timeline are now down an Avenger, meaning that when Clint goes to Vormir to get the Soul Stone, they're down a sacrifice and then down a stone. So congratulations, you just ensured that they couldn't bring anyone back. That one's admittedly a little annoying. There is some, and that's also, I think, another minor flaw I have with this movie: the humor. Mostly because here's the thing. While I do like having fun superhero stuff, and this film does definitely have its share of fun action or of fun superhero action, when it does try to delve into the humor, while for the most part it does work it does what work for the most part in some areas, I feel like it could have been downplayed in some others. especially in the morbid present. Some characters I do feel have a place to be fun. Do definitely feel like they should be more fun. Moment that should be happy, like with Tony and his family, and there are definitely some really hilarious moments. The scene with Scott, that made me laugh my ass off when I first saw it, and then of course there's still the gags when Scott is, and then there's of course the gag when Scott meets Nebula for the first time. He says, "Hi, I'm Scott," and then when she sees him, she's like, she goes to her comments and says, "Rhodey, watch the landing zone. There's an idiot. Watch your landing. There's an idiot in the landing zone." It's I love that. That's just nice, and it fits Nebula so well. So well, and I admit this is a nitpick at best, and so like I said, it's a minor nitpick, but I think that also kind of helps with it. But I do feel like that in some areas the humor could have been toned down a bit. Another thing, some characters feel superfluous, which I think makes sense for this movie because while it is cool seeing all these heroes come together at once, at the same time we primarily stuck with these other group of heroes, and while it is cool seeing these heroes come back again, especially with what happened in Infinity War, it is that it would have been cooler. It would still have been better to get to know them more, especially with Hope. I didn't know, especially with Hope, especially with the Wasp. Like I said, I hadn't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp prior to seeing this movie, so yeah, it was cool seeing her in the Wasp. It didn't feel as triumphant for me. But then again, that can go back to the you should have seen the other films before you saw this one. So that one could be on my bad. So yeah, one probably is on my that one probably is my fault. I have seen Ant-Man and the Wasps now. So and on top of that though, that also leads to another problem. This film is fucking packed. Well, I already mentioned with the plot lines in this film, and while Infinity War definitely had a stacked up plot, had their own stacked plot lines as well. This one definitely feels more so, as even when they do conclude the plot lines, the climax has so much going on. It is hard to keep track of what's going on where. All the stuff with all the heroes being separated, the fighting with Thanos trying to get out of the rubble, fighting off the Chitauri, passing the law and going here and there. There is so much to keep track of in the climax. That's cool. And I'm not doing this to dissuade the climax. It's still the most kick-ass thing the MCU has ever produced. But it is cluttered. It is full. This film is packed with a lot of stuff. And while it is supposed to be there to be fan wanky, it definitely feels like they're kind of overblowing it a bit here. Yes, I know. Big payoff for all this whole thing. Cool to see all this thing. But the downside is it's kind of hard to keep track of a lot of stuff when this is going on. And while the film does still manage to get some primary focus on, especially with the character drama, when you're trying to focus on so much of it at once, it can lead to your audience getting lost. Combine that with the 3-hour time for this film, and it definitely feels like you've been here a while. Even when I sat down and watched this movie, when it was finally over, I had to get up and stretch. Just goddamn, it was so long. Damn. But with that being said, this film is still really good. It's got a lot. It definitely feels like a great payoff to over a decade of build-up. The character dynamics, I think, are still really nice, and seeing them all interact is great. The desperation that these characters feel when they finally have a chance to undo what Thanos did definitely feels real. Like they know, that they know that this could easily blow up in their faces. That everything they're doing up here could be for nothing. But but at the same time, you know that they still want to try it anyway because, well, they've already lost. What good could this do? It definitely feels like it could work, and and in a way, I think it does. The drama and I think that's actually the film's biggest I think that's the film's biggest strength. The tension. Even before Thanos becomes aware of their plan and then goes to the future, to try and stop them, you definitely get the sense that things can easily go wrong. Things get just all they need is one little thing to go awry, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. That I think helps add to the tension. As such, and of course, you can still say they could have probably brought Tony back with a time stone, which I respond with, "Don't ruin it, please don't, just don't." But I think that's ultimately the film's biggest strength. Just like I said, the action And like the acting is great. I like the character dynamics. The tone works so well for the situation. Everything feels damn near deep. The humor could, for the most part, I think is really damn funny and fitting. There are some minor jokes here and there that I think don't work, but otherwise I think the rest really do work out. The action is super kick ass and fun to watch, especially the climax. While even though it's cluttered, Thanos is still a really great villain. Josh Brolin still brings his A game to the role, and it pays off in spades. The the journey to get the Infinity Stones across time, I think, is a nice callback to the previous, is not to all of them, but to the previous films. And I love how this film wraps up certain characters' arcs. Well, certain characters' arcs. Yeah, some characters don't feel like they do deserve more. While I do like what happened with Black Widow, I do understand the arguments put there. I do get that. And while the film can be packed, and while the film I think can be packed, can be a bit too long in some areas, at the end of the day, I still think Avengers Endgame is more than worth it. It is so grand. It is so amazing. It feels like it definitely took everything that happened before it and paid it all off in this giant blockbuster movie. It gives us great characterization, great action, a lot of so many fun moments that make you look at the screen and cheer. Great tension, great effects, great acting. There are some, even just and just a lot and just plenty of emotional moments to give characters closure. The stuff with Scott and Cassie meeting up again and both reacting to seeing each other after this time. Tony seeing his father, Cap seeing Peggy, Thor seeing his mother and her helping him overcome his problems. There's so much to talk about. And I feel like if I kept talking about it, I would be here. I would be here for maybe another half hour, which I already am stretching it by making this 2 hours, and I don't want to do that again. It's just at the end of the day, Avengers Endgame I think is a fantastic movie. While I openly admit, like with Infinity War, you gotta be a fan of the MCU in order to fully appreciate this movie, which I know does still sound elitist to me. I don't really like saying that, but I think it's kind of true. At the end of the day, Avengers Endgame, I think is a fantastic, breathtaking not breathtaking, but awe-inspiring film that any comic book fan and fan of the MCU would greatly appreciate, and I think it does well with ending ending the first story arc, the first great story arc of the MCU. So yeah. But with that said, we're not done yet. There's still one more movie we need to look at before we are officially caught up on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, next time we meet, ladies and gentlemen, it's time that we take a quick peek at a world without Iron Man, as we see what a certain Web Wonder has to do is going to react to a world that's been without him for 5 years as he tries readjusting in Spider-Man: Far From Home.